A global index measuring bribery risks faced by businesses shows that the Philippines has improved its ranking, but its overall score worsened this year. Joining us now from London is Alexandra Wrage, the president of TRACE, the International Business Association behind the annual bribery risk matrix. Alexandra, thank you so much for joining us. Before we get into the details, how do you come up with the bribery risk index? Do you visit all of these countries?
No, this is data-driven, and we compile a number of different sources, and they change slightly from year to year, which can account for some of the changes that you see in scoring. But what we're trying to assess is not corruption on the ground more generally, but very specifically commercial corruption. What risk do companies face when they're doing business in this case, the Philippines? How likely are they to be asked for a bribe?
And where do you get your data?
We have a number of different sources. We use internationally vetted resources from nonprofits. Until very recently, we use the World Bank, Ease of Doing Business, a number of different World Bank, global justice sources, Transparency International, and others. So we compile a large number of sources looking at things like, how many times do you have to interact with the government to get a particular task completed? With a theory that, and it's pretty well supported by anecdotal evidence, if you need to touch the government 3 or 4 times for a single transaction, that creates that many more opportunities to be asked for a bribe.
So in this particular bribery risk index, why did the Philippines improve its ranking, Alexandra?
I'm afraid I don't really have good news for you on that. It is primarily, we did a deep dive look at this, and it is primarily due to a shift in the data sources. There has been marginal improvement in government transparency around contract processes and salaries, but on the whole, the Philippines, I'm afraid, still has some work to do in order to improve its standing overall. What
more work to do does the Philippines have to improve in its ranking?
So the matrix provides a bit of a roadmap for governments that are serious about improving their climate for corporations doing business there. Some of the easy, low-hanging fruit would be to improve support for civil society and journalism. That's a score that's diminished, fallen recently. Also, more transparency around enforcement. If people don't believe that there's going to be consequences for paying bribes, then on the whole, they're more likely to pay bribes. So seeing a very strong, committed, consistent with the rule of law and consistent over time approach to enforcing anti-bribery cases can make an enormous difference. And then all of the things you might imagine, e-government, being able to do more things online has really helped countries improve their standing, because if you're not interacting with a government official, you can't be asked for a bribe by a government official.
So when all is said and done, if you really take a deep dive in all of the information about the Philippines, is corruption among civil servants still rampant than ever?
I'm afraid its levels are still very high. Yes, the ranking of the Philippines overall is mid-level, certainly better than some countries in the region, but with lots of room for improvement.
And overall, Alexandra, which nation had the lowest risk for commercial bribery and why?
I'm sorry, the greatest risk?
No. Which particular country overall had the lowest risk for commercial bribery?
I'm sorry, yes. It's always one of the Nordics. It's always because the numbers are very similar. It's often the Netherlands, Norway, New Zealand's always fairly near the top. Again, we try not to get too concerned about the tight rankings at the top and the bottom, because mathematically the distinctions are not that great. But
what about
those 3 countries?
What about here in Asia, the Philippines' neighbors? Which country topped the rankings?
Japan did very well this year. South Korea and Taiwan were quite close, as was Singapore. They're all good for different reasons. Singapore has very transparent processes, but isn't particularly supportive of civil society or journalism, whereas Japan ranks higher on that and so came in first in Asia.
What about the countries in Asia that had the highest commercial bribery risk?
Well, probably surprising nobody, North Korea came dead last in the whole world, not just in Asia. There's almost no transparency at all. And because the government controls the entire commercial market, then the opportunity for government capture is very high, and enforcement, to our knowledge, of anti-bribery efforts is non-existent there. Cambodia and Myanmar also came out quite poorly.
Thank you so much for your insights on this bribery risk index. Alexandra Wrage, President of Trace, joining us from London.